Welcome everybody to my channel. My name is Simon Hill. Thank you for being here. I have a special guest here on this video today, and I'm really looking forward to having a productive conversation. It's very rare in life that you meet people who are bright, intelligent, young, handsome, and melanated, all in one. Since I've started my channel, I've been releasing content just showing my life and also talking about issues related to travel for Black people and being a guiding light and providing perspective to help Black travelers as they journey across the world. As well, I give commentary off and on about various political and social topics around the world. And a video I released recently about the coup in Niger attracted another bright young mind who's out in the world who wants to advocate for positive things, especially in Africa. So I want to welcome Timothy Kasuka Lobban to my channel. Thank you for coming, good sir.
It's lovely to be here, and it's nice for us to finally connect and just chop it up and chat a bit more about all the different happenings nowadays and our different lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to hearing from you, sir, and for you to provide, information for this audience. But before we begin, would you mind plugging your YouTube channel or where people can find you on social media and your writings, whatever you have going on?
Okay, so yeah, there's a couple things that I'm working kind of, on and off on. So there is first and foremost Sleeping Giant Africa, which is a YouTube channel that more does video essays on different topics surrounding development, construction, the politics of Africa. Then there's another YouTube channel that I sometimes just upload, footage of me traveling. So I guess kind of similar to what you do, but maybe just more just filming like the sights and sounds and the landscape. I'm more kind of the guy behind the camera, just taking recordings of the sights. I'm not the most camera embracing person. It only takes special people and special occasions to kind of get me out of my dungeon and in front of a camera. Yes, there's another one, RandomAfricanVids, where I just upload random videos of me traveling. And then recently I've been just keeping a little Medium blog where I just write about different ideas on Africa and different areas, kind of like opinion pieces, that type of thing. So yeah, there's my stuff. Sleeping Giant Africa, RandomAfricanVids, and if you search Timothy Kasuka Lobban Medium, you'll find some of my stuff.
Great. All the links for all of his channels, his Medium blog will all be in the description here. So please go check it out. Please go support him on this channel. We will always elevate Black voices and elevate people who are advocating for positive changes in the world and who are bright and intelligent. So thank you, Tim, for being here once again. Let's get to it. So I've shared a lot of my life. If you're new watching this channel, I'm Simon Hill. I'm from Louisiana. I'm 32 years old. I'm an English teacher and a world traveler, and also somebody with a point of view that I feel like needs to get across. And I'm half Belizean, half American. And Tim, would you mind telling us about your background, where you grew up, what country you're from, anything like that?
It's a bit crazy, as in many ways we're quite similar. So yes, my name is Tim. I'm 32 years old. I'm also an online English teacher. I guess you could say half British, half Jamaican. I was born in the UK, but my family are from Jamaica. And I was born in the UK, raised in London. And then once I finished college, I decided to go and start living in China. That's
wow.
That's
what a jump.
Kind of another story, because I first visited China way back in 2010 when I was like 19, and that was for an opportunity to work there. There was like a big World Expo going on at the time, where different countries would have their stands and pavilions showcasing their culture and different industries. And it's an expo. It's kind of used as a platform for businesses and different organizations and institutions from different countries to just be at one gathering point and actually get to talk to each other and make links, and you see where that leads to. So I was just doing a little summer job like hosting. It was a fun time. So that was my first time visiting China at 19, and as you would expect, like a 19-year-old kid, living on his own in this massive metropolis known as Shanghai.
Wow.
I ended up taking a liking to the country and the culture.
Mhm.
That's what led me back there upon graduation. And then for about 5 to 6 years, I just did a bunch of different things in China in terms of teaching English, teaching different subjects like economics, and I worked in management. I just, yeah,
Did a
yeah,
lot, did a lot. Sounds like you did a lot. Let's just take a step back. So you mentioned that you're half Jamaican, half British. So tell us, did you grow up mostly in the UK? Did you grow up in Jamaica? What town, what city? Tell us about the great Isle of Britain.
Not too bad on the accent there. Not too bad of a job. So yes, I'm from London, south of London to be specific, southeast London. I'm from Lewisham, the borough of
Lewisham.
Lewisham. It's close to, I guess, Kent, or I guess it's close to Greenwich, which you might know from like GMT, Greenwich Mean Time.
Yeah.
And yeah, over there they've got like, some museums as a like hill that you can go to and see the clock. So
Mhm.
that's where I'm from. That's where it's close by, nearby. I've spent the bulk of my life until graduation growing up in the UK. I have visited Jamaica before in the past,
Mhm.
only once though. Shamefully enough, I've been meaning to, yeah, make a couple more visits. Yeah, just haven't been necessarily gotten round to it, but it's still no excuse. I do need to do it. Yeah, I visited Jamaica once, and yeah, even with, within my family, yeah, we still very much have that connection in terms of a lot of my family still travel back and forth in Jamaica, from Jamaica to the UK. Some of them live there or like building houses and businesses. So
Right.
there is that connection within the family, even if I'm not necessarily there at the place and at the country. But yeah, bulk of my time growing up in the UK, then China, and now Africa. So
Right.
it's difficult to kind of pin down my identity for some people anyway.
Our lives do mirror each other a lot because growing up as half Belizean, half American, I only visited Belize sporadically growing up as a kid, when my parents just dragged me there. Half of the time I don't remember because they were so long ago. So growing up in the south of London, what was it like? Was it a homogenous place, mixed place? What sort of people did you see around you? Was it a working class area? Tell us.
Yeah, so thinking about the Lewisham Borough of London, I mean, London generally is like quite a diverse and multicultural place. You get lots of Indian and like Asian Brits across different parts of London. Then there's Black Brits, mostly descending from the Caribbean, and they kind of came from the Windrush days. Then you get different African migrants, from different countries such as Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Somalia, those different countries. Yeah, they kind of came along more in the 80s and 90s when I think perhaps, yeah, some immigration rules changed. I don't know, but that's
Mhm.
when that kind of those different waves started happening. So, and then, yeah, it's also a large mixed race population in terms of, especially among younger age cohorts. But yeah, Lewisham is, I guess you could say, working class, lower middle class type of area. There are definitely some rough parts of the neighborhood. Um, when I was growing up, it was it was quite tough there. I,
Mhm.
I will
Mhm.
definitely say that, especially as as a black youth. You found yourself in a space where, when it came to other youth,
Mhm.
the ones who are more tied to kind of gangs and like, petty street crime and,
Mhm. Mhm.
things like that. And
Mhm.
yeah, depending on where you are and at what time, if they see you there on your own or what
Mhm.
have you, it's like, yeah, it's kind of like that sort of jungle sort of meant like kill or
Right.
be killed, but like,
Right. Right.
be punked or punk out or whatever. When I was growing up, it was quite tough. Even the school I went to was, yeah, quite a rough school. And at one point, one of the worst schools in the country. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it came with its challenges. There were, different areas like Peckham, New Cross, Deptford, Monson. In the old days,
Mhm.
when I
Mhm.
mentioned names,
Mhm.
people's ears would prick up at like, since then, things have changed, and you might have heard or you might see it happening maybe in cities, across your country. But yeah, London is just being flooded with like, money from all corners of the world. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're getting, these different areas that I just mentioned to you before. They're kind of unrecognizable today because they've partly been, gentrified in terms of, the property values are going up.
Tell us about what you studied in university and wanted to do for work.
Even now, I still wonder what I want to do for work. When I was studying at the time, I still didn't completely know. I knew it had something to do with writing. Yeah,
Mhm,
I think that more than anything else. I think I'm a creative at heart. Yeah, I enjoy creating.
mhm.
So, but yes, in terms of what I studied, I guess, like an economics-based degree. So that's like gets me excited. It's the economy, it's economics.
Nice, nice. By the way, everybody watching, his economic analysis is very insightful, especially when it comes to Africa. When I was traveling across Turkey, I was reading his writings while I was on the bus, and he pointed out that actually Africa has a lower default rate for foreign loans than actually Europe. And it's very insightful. He provides a lot of great information, and you writing for economics is actually really good. So tell us about going to China after graduating. Tell us what year you got there, how long you stayed there, where you traveled around China, that sort of thing.
First episode of me going to China when I was 19, and that was when I was taking a kind of year break, a gap year between high school and college. And yeah, that was for a summer job, like a short-term thing. And then once I finished my studies, I then returned. And yeah, when I returned, I was first teaching in China. Cities are ranked according to tiers, and
Hmm.
the tiers are awarded based on like population size and maybe what businesses you host there, how international it is, what kind of infrastructure you have, like how big your subway system is, whatever.
Hmm.
And yeah, places like the cities we all know, like Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, those are, the massive first tier cities with like 20 million plus. And then there was the city I was in called Jining, which was,
Meaning.
of course, one pole at one point in time, and that was while I was there, like around the 2010s. It was one of the most, if not the most traditional city in China.
Mm.
But whatever this was according to some kind of poll. I'm not too sure if it's entirely accurate. It felt more like a word around the street thing that you would kind of hear while there. But it was certainly, quite a small city. Definitely things were much smaller and simpler. It was not like Shanghai. There were no subways, no like big, massive skyscrapers. There were bigger buildings, but nothing too crazy. But yeah, that was, starting my kind of career and my work journey in that city, even though it was, quite a small town and there were hardly any foreigners. So,
Mm.
this city might have a population of like 1 to 2 million. And when you look at the number of foreigners they have based on like, who's registered and staying there long term, they have this information because of the
Mm.
visa system. And there must have been like 100, 200.
That's a
Yeah,
crazy ratio. That's an insane ratio.
very few foreigners. So when you were like going to different places, you would catch people's attention, and but a lot of it was just friendliness and kind of being hospitable, like just wanted to like chat with you and get to learn more about where you're from and your culture. Yeah, just hang out. And it was good in a way, but it forced me to learn more Chinese. Nobody could speak English. Yeah, there
Mm.
was a workplace and people tied to that business who could speak some level of English, but like 95% of the population there can't really speak it to any real fluent level. So you just have to you have to figure it out. And yeah,
Mm.
it just helped just kind of take my Chinese up to a next level where like I'm not fluent, but I can have a conversation.
How long did
Yeah.
you end up staying in Jining?
So I was there for 6 months. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So not for very long. I kind of got itchy feet. I started looking at opportunities. Yeah, I found a better paying job opportunity that would take me further along my career path as a teacher. In terms of when I
Hmm.
first arrived, I was just like yeah, teaching English, and then when I moved on to the second job, it was me teaching economics, like at a high school that prepared students for study abroad.
Was that also
So
in
that was
Jining, or was that another city in China?
it was in the same state, or what they say in China as a province, and that was Shandong province.
Hmm.
But yeah, it was in a fairly bigger city called Qingdao. Like it's
Nice.
known for producing a particular type of beer, and it has a beach, and they do boat races there sometimes. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was nice to go to a bigger city, and yeah, just work in a different job, get a different experience. I was there in that job for about a year or so, and then after that, I kind of took a break to study a bit, like study more Chinese, but maybe at a more full-time level. And then that was from 2014 to 2016, and then from like 2016 to 2020, I was in Beijing. Yeah, so hanging out in the capital.
Being in Beijing must have been a culture shock, going from lower tiered cities, which are still massive, but then Beijing is world renowned for being a huge megalopolis. Did you find yourself accustomed there? Did you miss being in the smaller city? What did you feel transitioning to that larger Chinese city?
I feel like when you travel and you visit different countries, sometimes the first place that you spend, I don't know, like considerable time in can kind of like leave a mark on or an impression on kind of the types, what works for you
Hmm.
or what
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
kind of come to sort of know that country for. For me, when I first arrived in China, again, I stayed in Shanghai. So, Shanghai is essentially the biggest city in China, and
Hmm.
just the type of place, like, yeah, we've got this picture in my background right now. But if that was Shanghai, those would all be like 20, 30-story buildings. And that was like the first place that I kind of landed on was like Shanghai, 2010 Shanghai, where like the Chinese economic boom was still really in full swing. And, the expo was going on, so it was even crazier. So that was kind of what I came into China with in terms
Hmm.
of the vast expanse, the big city, the kind of like fast paced lifestyle. When it came to me returning to Beijing, it didn't necessarily feel the most out of place. And yeah, again, if anything, I first arrived in Shanghai, and Beijing is nice, but compared to Shanghai, yeah, there's just that bit more happening in Shanghai. Beijing is more the kind of cultural and entertainment capital. So that's where
Hmm.
the artists are, and that's where different businesses, they might go there once a year to sort out some visa stuff or maybe attend a particular conference
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
speak with central government for business matters, depending on
Hmm.
like the type of business they are. But
Right.
yeah, Shanghai is the kind of like bigger, more international
Hmm. Hmm.
city. So yeah, going to Beijing was like, okay, more the same, back to
Hmm.
business.
Did you ever see yourself living longer term in China?
Yeah, when it comes to that, yeah, no, it was always maybe stay here for a few years, and if I ever found myself in a situation where I found myself, having a family in China, then it would be the situation where, after a certain amount of time, maybe a couple years, once the child is ready to start like school and you know really get into the swing of those things, that would be where I'd maybe go elsewhere, maybe return back to the UK or
Hmm.
go somewhere else. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, live in China permanently, just mainly because of immigration.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, it's essentially impossible to become a naturalized Chinese citizen in terms of, it's not like America or the UK after like 6 or 7 years. If you behaved yourself and you're ticking all
Hmm.
the boxes, you're able to like pass the test and answer the questions on these citizenship tests. You get
Hmm.
the passport. It doesn't work like that in China. You can't get the passport. Even to get a green card is very difficult. I know
Right.
people, they've lived in China for 10 plus years. They got family, kids, and still, every year, or maybe every 2 years if they're lucky, they need to renew. They need to renew
Mm.
their business visa or their work visa. And if they can't find a way to do that, they have to
Hmm.
make other plans.
It's notoriously difficult to remain in China as a permanent resident. There are some people that find a way. There are some people that, love China, fall in love with China. So that's why I was asking, wondering if you were considering that. So, Tim, I have to ask you, what was it like being Black in China in many different cities and places in the region? We've heard a lot of stories about anti Blackness happening in China, explicit and implicit racism against people here. So I would like to know your experience and just be honest and frank for our viewers, please.
I guess, yeah, for me, when it came to my experience, I'd say generally it's been quite positive in terms of, yeah, different people I've interacted with throughout my time in China, who I've made friends with, who I've dated at times. It's, generally been good vibes. Again, I will say that for any person of, color, like a Black person, but even, anyone who's not Chinese really or not Asian, you're just going to stand out there because, yeah, many countries within East Asia, such as Japan, China, Korea, are quite racially homogenous. And if, interestingly enough, compared to those other two, China's in a way less racially homogenous and more diverse than those countries because 10% of the population are not Han Chinese, which is, yeah, when we think of Han Chinese, that's most Chinese people that you will see in media and on TV. Also have to remember that it wasn't until the 1990s, really, or even the 2000s, where many people got the opportunity to meet and chat with foreigners. Before a very long time, like 30, 40 plus years, it was, yeah, non-Chinese were all but essentially banned from visiting the country, or it was very difficult. Up until Mao's death, you can essentially say China was like what North Korea is today. Picture it from that perspective in terms of now people are being opened up to this new world, and it's going to take time for people to get used to it. So it's not necessarily anything personal where they look at you and stare, or they kind of tap their friends and like, oh, look, la wai, la wai. That means a foreigner, Chinese. It's usually out of curiosity. Again, it was mainly good vibes. Something that definitely helps with your experience in a country like China is learning the language, or just learning how to say some phrases like, thank you, hello, goodbye, nice to meet you. People will appreciate that and really be impressed by it. In terms of my treatment as a Black person, yeah, I guess, yeah, generally good vibes. But, on the other hand, there's the fact that, I'm from the UK. So maybe if it was a situation where I was from, I don't know, Rwanda, where I'm based right now, or Kenya, or an African country, perhaps the treatment and the reception might have been quite different. On the rare occasions where you might get racism or kind of racist microaggressions, a lot of the time it's just stemming from just ignorance, just not really having any idea about, different Black people and their cultures and their histories. And a lot of the time in those scenarios, it's just a matter of like just chatting with them and just kind of saying like, hey, it's not actually like this, not all of Africa is poor. Look, here are some pictures of like Nairobi or like Johannesburg or Addis Ababa. Then, it's kind of like you move on.
As somebody who studied Chinese, it seems like from what you said before, in depth for some good amount of time, are you aware of any anti-Black racial slurs that might exist in their language that Black travelers should be wary of? Like if we hear this word, we say, okay, we know they're talking about us.
I guess there's the term "hey gui."
Hey,
It's
Gui.
like hey, yeah, hey, which means black, and then gui, which means devil. So like black devil.
Wow.
Um, there was yeah, but then I've only heard something you read about in books and you see in dictionaries. I've only heard somebody use it once, and yes, that person actually used it towards me. It was like this young guy, and he was, like handing out flyers for something. And I think he wanted, I just kind of kept it moving And I think that kind of upset him a bit. He was like, oh, hey, Gui. And then I heard him and I was like, just again, because if you were in a situation where you found yourself on the receiving end of some kind of racism in China, just more, oh, this is an outsider. I don't know much about them. Now I'm making all of these assumptions. So yeah, that young guy, he called me, hey, Gui, whatever. I just went back. I just had a chat with him in Chinese. I was just like, why call me that? It's not a nice thing to say. I'm just trying to go about my business with you, just like you. And then he ended up apologizing. And then he went his way, I went my way. There's hey, Gui. Hey, Gui. Yeah,
Wait,
that's one term. But that's the only one time I've ever heard it. And then you'll just hear Lao Wai, which just means foreigner. It's just a term generally
right.
used for foreigners.
While living in China, did you see in media or in any representation in public caricatures of Black people? There are some places where they still use the Sambo image, or people dress up in blackface, or they think it's funny to, make caricatures and jokes about us as people or our personalities, what they deem to be our personalities. Did you ever see anything like that while in China?
Oh no, yeah, definitely. You may have heard of it, but there's a toothpaste made by a Taiwanese company, but it's been sold in China for forever, at least a couple decades, and it's called Hey Ren Yali. Yali means teeth, and Hey, black, and Ren is just black people teeth, black man teeth. And it's yes, it's this toothpaste, and you've got this guy. I think he's in blackface and he's got like a top hat like to the side and he's just got this big smile and it's like, hey, Red Yali, and it's this idea where they people in China they believe that we have really white teeth, so that's like the marketing ploy of like, oh, you use this toothpaste, you have like white teeth like a black. So there is certainly that. I I have no idea how it's still in stores being sold. When I think of other caricatures, this was a while ago though. This was years ago, about 6 years ago, where there was this commercial, and it was advertising a laundry detergent cleaner. I think you might have saw this one where it's this Chinese lady and she's speaking with this black dude on this commercial, and then she takes him, throws him in the washing machine, puts in this soap, and then he like comes out of it looking white, like he's a completely different person. Yeah, that was pretty bad. Like it got a lot of blowback, and I think they ended up removing, like taking down the commercial because of just the backlash. People were like, lots of foreigners were saying it's racist, and some Chinese were also saying like, yeah, no, you can't do this. Yeah, there was also another controversial one that happened about 5 years ago, where there was a exhibition that was taking place in Wuhan. 6 years ago, there was an exhibition, but they essentially had pictures of different kinds of monkeys and chimps side by side. Yeah, side by side with black faces, and it was like, come on, guys, dude, what? And you could, I don't know, I don't know if it was a troll or if it was just genuine ignorance. But you see, this is my point. This is what happens when, you know, 30 years prior to that, it was basically North Korea. I guess just in terms of that ignorance, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm saying it could have been a troll, but then I can also see how somebody could just make this silly mistake, especially when, again, they just might not be aware of those comparisons. But yes, they had the monkey faces lined up right next to the black faces, and again, there was a lot of blowback. A lot of people were just like saying, end this exhibition, blah blah blah. And they eventually kind of took it down and apologized. There was also another one that happened. It happened about 4 years ago, where it was every year for the Chinese New Year. They have this big show. It's like the Chinese New Year gala. And it just shows celebrations and different plays, and everybody comes together to watch it. And one year they're doing one where I guess it was showing cultural cooperation and connectedness between China and Africa.
Mhm.
And you may have seen that one where there was this old Chinese lady who was, kind of acting and walking around in blackface, like playing an African woman. Yeah, that happened. This Chinese woman in blackface, and it didn't stop there. She was like wearing like the African clothing, like the kind of garbs and the like
Wow.
headband,
Wow.
kind of like carrying like a basket with bananas. It was very kind of stereotypical, like the sort of Africa you kind of just saw from like a children's picture book like 30, 40 years ago. Shortly after, everybody was just like, what is going on? This is crazy. And people were just taking the mick out of it.
So there have been a lot of instances of our image not being shown in the best light. And while we might attribute it to ignorance or people not knowing, I think we can all agree that racism always comes from ignorance and we don't need to excuse it, really. But we can understand it, but we shouldn't excuse it. But generally, you're making very good points and examples. This channel is not about dating or relationships, but it's interesting that you brought it up. So I wanted to ask you, what was it like dating in China as a Black person? And how did you meet the people that you were going out on dates with? What were those conversations like? Was your Blackness ever an issue? Anything like that? Go ahead.
I guess just to quickly say on the last point on that issue of the like races, things are improving. I will say that in terms of you do see those negative examples, but there are also positive examples. You'll see videos online, and I've seen people in person when I've gone to these places where you get Chinese people who are using all these different chemicals and like using the blow dryer once and then washing it and using it again, trying to make their hair kind of like their texture similar to ours. And in many first and second tier cities, if you go into the bars or clubs, almost every bar or club, they're going to be playing hip hop, R&B. That's not just in the big cities, that's also
Mhm.
in the smaller cities because
Mhm.
of how mainstream it's become. And then that also influences like the look. Chinese people are known to be like, yeah, people from mainland China are known to be big sneakerheads. So they're really into that. Even seeing this trend where increasingly more, it's a small number, but it's growing, where more Chinese people for the longest of times, they've always wanted to have white skin. That's the thing in Asia because of the whole like, oh, we sat in the house and didn't need to labor in the sun type of thing.
Mhm.
So for the longest of time, white skin was the in thing and cool thing. So on a sunny day, you'll see Asian people throughout China and the world walking with umbrellas or wearing like those arm guards and stuff on their face because they don't want to keep their skin pale. But now it's slowly beginning to like move in another direction where they want to like get tanned and darker skin. And you see big billboards where it's like very tan, darker person. So you are seeing those changes. When it comes to dating, I'd say that from my personal experiences and the experiences that I kind of gathered, Black men and women, yeah, people date, especially among the younger age groups. And if anything, because you are a foreigner, you're not necessarily Chinese. If anything, it can kind of work in your favor because it makes you stand out more. You're easier to remember. There's something different with you as whether that's you being black or white or from the Middle East. It's just that kind of foreign sort of flavor.
Mhm.
So have you. So there's that. When it comes to like marriage and settling down and having a family, yeah, a lot of it is like comes back to stereotypes and misunderstandings. So maybe if you were dating a Chinese lady and it came to time for you to meet their parents, the main thing on the parents' minds is just making sure that like you as the man and the husband and the breadwinner or the perceived breadwinner in that culture, you have your stuff together. That's the main in terms of if you're a good guy, good girl, um, you know, yeah, you just you're holding things down. You're not a bad person. You're genuine. You try to kind of at least meet. the family halfway when it comes to their culture and way of doing things, then yeah, I think it's generally quite open and cool. Because yeah, I have black friends, black guys, black women who are married in China and they do have children. Little bouts of ignorance, and maybe at the beginning, there may be times where I would find myself speaking or courting a particular lady in China. And maybe at the beginning, when she meets and chats with me, again, it's just different assumptions and stereotypes in terms of like, oh, like, who's this dude? But then, again, it's like once, you actually have that conversation and then just like, oh, okay, I'm getting to know more about this person, that kind of like sort of dissipates, goes away from what I found from my experience. I'd say, yeah, my take on that would be, and yeah, if you look at Chinese history, in a way, it kind of like supports this. And that is, yeah, when it comes to Chinese culture and its approach to outsiders, marrying into the family. That's how it works with a lot of Chinese marriages, like Chinese foreigner marriages, where it's like if you are going to get married, you're marrying into their culture. Like
Mm,
your kids gonna learn Chinese, they're gonna
mm,
dress like Chinese. They're kind of like your spouses, parents, grandchildren in a way more than your own grandparents. People get really possessive, culturally in China for different reasons. So, and yeah, you see that with its history in terms of China, throughout thousands of different years has been invaded and temporarily conquered by like other surrounding ethnicities, whether it's the Mongolians under the Yuan dynasty, and then the Manchu, the Manchu of like northeast China, which are they are like Chinese, but they're like mixed with Russian as well. They're not Han Chinese. But yeah, they came in and also took over and controlled the country. But then they would take control of it, and within a few decades, they would kind of become Chinese. Like they'd start dressing up like the locals, speaking the language, taking on the teachings and the culture. So that yeah, Chinese culture is assimilating you into their culture versus keep you out. It's more like okay, if you're going to join, you have to join on these terms.
while dating, did anybody ever say any of these stereotypes related to the Black man's genitalia or our sexuality? Because this is something that I've confronted when I was dating abroad.
Oh no, yeah, that was definitely there. Yes, that's yeah, there was that stereotype, and yes, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Good example on one occasion, and this was obviously back when I was in Jining, like the much smaller city, where again this is like the city Jining. It's actually like 40 or 50 miles away from Confucius's like home. So it's got that like tradition and that history to it. But yes, it's still quite rural. A lot of
Mm,
the people there, maybe they just showed up at that city the other day, or maybe they go there for work and then they go back to their home in the countryside. And whether it's within China or many other parts of the world, rural areas and the country homes and country towns are still just so
mm,
far behind compared to the
yeah.
cities in terms of like technology and the modern trappings. So yes, there was a time I was in this small city and I was hanging out with like a bunch of Chinese guys, like my Chinese friends. One was called Li Kai and Li Hong. We were drinking, having a good time. The World Cup was on, having a laugh, whatever. I must have went to the men's bathroom and one of every foreign guy in China has this story where, I'm just there at the urinal, minding my own business, answering nature's call. And then, yeah, like, my man, Lee Hong was just like, he's going pee. And he just came up and he's like, and then he just like, yeah, it's like, just started like, yeah, I was like, what? Yeah, Chinese sense of humor hits different, let's say that.
How did that situation make you feel though? Because we can laugh about it now, but when I would feel very uncomfortable if I was using a urinal and somebody was making a glance at my genitalia.
Definitely felt weird, but I also just found it funny as well. There was also that, but yeah, it was like obviously not something like yeah, you should like don't do that.
Yeah.
To anybody watching this, if you are like wherever you are, if you go to toilet and you see like a black dude go and pee or any other ethnicity or man, do not like scuttle up next to them and just kind of like click your neck and be like, whoa. It was funny. There was also
Yeah.
that, but yeah, don't do that.
You mentioned earlier that you had some other Black friends that you met there in China, and I guess other foreigners as well that you met and made friends with and connections with. But when you talked to your Black friends that were there, were they mostly from Africa? Were they from the diaspora or the Western world? And when you heard about their experiences living in China, do you think that their experiences mirror yours? Do you think they were any different, that they had any other different interactions or reactions to Chinese culture or people?
When it comes to my friend circle of black people, I say it was half and half between those who were coming from like different Western countries in terms of the UK, France, Germany, Belgium, USA, Canada, and then yeah, different people coming from different parts of Africa, mainly like Nigeria, Kenya, the Congo. Those are like, yeah, when I think of most of the Africans you see in China, it's from those countries. You could see there was that difference between black people coming from Western countries and then black people coming from African countries in terms of there was just that assumption that because this person's from this African country, they're poor and get away from me, you're poor, what can you add to me? So there was that kind of stereotype and stigma was attached to being an African national in some kind of circles. With that said, things are improving. Yeah, as you know, China's quite active on the African continent when it comes to politics or business, the economy in general. Over the years, you've had a lot more Africans coming to China, mostly to study and increasingly to work. So things are changing and moving in the right direction. That's the thing with China, is that 40 years ago, this country was North Korea. So then when you have a situation where it's been closed off and isolated for so long, and then it's just suddenly open to the modern world, people aren't just going to click. It takes our minds and our culture and whatever it is, time to catch up with that. So yeah, I will say this, there was a difference in treatment, but with each passing year, I see that difference becoming smaller and smaller. Because I know there was a time when I first arrived in China back in 2010. Yeah, when I think of like different Black people and Africans in particular in China, you had a few who were students, and hey, it was just a different world back then. Like a lot of the guys there were hustling, like hustling coke, like hustling, like slinging drugs in China. Yeah. Hey, that was and yeah, and you'd be walking on the street and you just see like different dudes just planning and they'd be like, oh hey, they would make their sales. Eventually, they clamped down on that. But the fact that when I first arrived in China, a lot of the Black and African guys I saw were either, kind of like hustling at night, selling, trying to get whatever they can because they couldn't find other job opportunities. And yeah, I even bumped into a Ghanaian man who was a student. This was over 10 years ago. And he spoke about how he couldn't find a job and there were no opportunities for him because of where he's from and his accent, what have you. Nowadays in China, at least last time I was there, when I think of a lot of my African friends in Beijing, yeah, yeah, quite a few of them had their own businesses. Some of them were working for, different Chinese companies, working as like designers, architects. Yeah, I think it's moving in the right direction. I guess the important thing to remember is, yeah, 20 years ago in Beijing, um, I read about this on a Reddit post. There's like, yeah, like the hospitals would not admit black people. They would not let you in. Like 2005, 2006,
Hmm.
before the Olympics. Then the Olympics came along and it was like, guys, I know you're doing this before these things, but like, yeah, they're looking now.
Let me just ask, before,
Yeah,
you're saying around 2005, 2006, black people could not go to the public Chinese hospitals or any Chinese hospitals?
I think at least in Beijing, from what the post was detailing, I read, and it would make sense at that time. Yeah, I don't think it was any hospitals because it was
Okay.
just down to this ignorance of, oh, everybody's got AIDS, so we take their blood, blah blah blah.
And do you know if they allowed the white foreigners or non-black foreigners to enter the hospitals?
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. So it was racism and ignorance, but that was again 2005. Since I've gone to Chinese hospitals in smaller cities, bigger cities. I know black people who have gone to hospitals as inpatients where they've been there for months. Like to have to think of such a thing happening in China today would be yeah, quite crazy. Say
Mm,
for example, there was
mm,
a situation where it did happen during COVID, where a few like
mm,
black people got refused in like one or two, like there was videos of it in one or two hospitals, but generally, like, yeah, if I was in China today and a black person came up to me and was like, this hospital refused to let me, that would be crazy. Like, what? Like,
mm,
it just wouldn't happen, or
mm,
very, very unlikely.
mm.
So, things move in the right direction.
While in China, did you ever meet any, white or non-black foreigners who were there? And what was their experience like being in China? Did they have any experiences of racism or discrimination as being foreigners?
They happen again, quite rare, but I'd say more than anything in China, it's less racism and more xenophobia. So a lot of the time, more than anything, when I found myself in those situations where I was on the receiving end of some kind of abuse or discrimination, it would almost be like 50-50 or 60-40 towards like, is this, you annoyed at me because I'm a foreigner or because I'm black? Or it's about xenophobia. So yes, there would be same for white people as well. As an expat, as a foreign male, and when you go out to clubs and you hit the night scene, it's a given rule that you kind of watch your back and you sort of move carefully because there's a lot of testosterone, there's a lot of kind of male competition. That's how it's seen. And just that kind of fact that China's so racially homogenous, it could get quite tense, when there's all these different Chinese, non-Chinese men and women, and sometimes the guys can get a bit guarded and protected. Whether you're a black foreigner and you kind of like maybe something's been misunderstood or you've set off the wrong people, and you end up getting into a fight. Again, it's usually tied to the kind of competition, ladies, whatever. Yeah, that's also happened to my white foreign friends as well, where like maybe they were a little drunk, they started talking smart or they were maybe doing too much when they were with a Chinese lady, and some guys came along and just yeah, like beating them up. Like a lot of xenophobic attacks have
Hmm.
happened. Yeah, not just to black people, but yeah, also to a lot of like white people. Where yeah, there's been stories of white expats and foreigners, getting killed.
Hmm.
By groups of
Hmm.
Chinese men in response to whatever.
The question about beauty standards. A country like China, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, might be very nasal gazing when it comes to their beauty standards. Maybe they have Sinocentric beauty standards that might be strange to us on the outside world. From what you've seen, would you say or would you disagree that China might view Western beauty standards as closer to the ideal outside of their own beauty standards, as in pale skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, thin bodies, structures, or would you disagree with that?
I would agree with that. To be honest, I don't think that's just something that we're seeing across China. I think that's something we're seeing all over the world. What I'm going to say might sound controversial, but I think it's accurate, and that is when we think of beauty standards, at least when I think of it in terms of female beauty standards, because a lot of beauty A lot of what we kind of hold as beauty more lies in the female domain because of the social construction or the biology or culture, all the things relating to that. And yeah, I think for women, yeah, whether it's in China or here in Rwanda, back when I was in Kenya, in the States, where you're from, in the UK, where I'm from, ideal aesthetic for a lot of these women and these young women in particular, is like Kim Kardashian. And, you know, like when you think about it, we look at how many followers she has, we look at her net worth, her notoriety. She, in many ways, is like the most well recognized and most influential woman in the world. You could really argue that. In terms of the Chinese aesthetics, like yes, you get people or different Asians, like East Asians, because of the epicantic fold that makes the eyes more angular or whatever. They have like a single eyelid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe like I think for us, I don't know, like double eyelid, one up here, kind of one down here. But for Chinese, it's just one. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a popular surgery. People get a second eyelid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to
Mm-hmm.
like make themselves look a bit more Western. So there's that. People might get nose jobs to make their noses smaller to look more Western. There is that aspect of the Western influence in terms of yeah, like whiteness. And then there's the other aspect in terms of, oh, Kim Kardashian, like, oh, everybody's going to the gym and doing squats, get the nice butt, tan their skin and kind of like, wear makeup that complements and makes their lips bigger. But again, I think that's happening everywhere. That's not just happening in China. That's happening here in Africa as well. Because the West that has media, entertainment, and culture, at least popular culture.
After my trip to Africa, I know for a fact that they don't have to do squats. Squats is not something that needs to be
Yes.
done. Last question in relation to China. Would you recommend Black travelers traveling to China? Do you think it's safe for Black travelers to China? Would you select any certain spots, like as in Black travelers, it's better to stay in the large cities, Beijing, Shanghai, or it's just as good to go to those smaller rural parts where we might be more rare?
I can't think of any places that I'd say are kind of out of bounds. I think, you'll be welcome just as much in a bigger city as you will in a smaller town or a country town. And if anything, it's in the smaller towns where, because you're so rare, they really, kind of like embrace you and welcome you. And, it reaches the point where it's almost awkwardness, they're like trying to give you things, out of like, oh, you're a guest, they'll just be giving you drinks or food, just to like, oh, welcome, very warm, welcoming, embracing. And yeah, I would recommend Black people to travel to China. There was a trip where my cousins and my younger brother came to visit me and stayed with me. And yeah, we traveled to a bunch of different places, different cities and towns throughout China. And we were all there walking around black, like 4 or 5 of us. And yeah, everywhere we went, good, warm, welcoming treatment because they could kind of see they were tourists. So they're like, oh, they give them the tourist treatment. I would definitely recommend it. Yeah.
Black travel family, now you know, look out for certain things, but feel safe and welcome in China. And just remember, respect yourself, the country you go to, and demand respect for yourself as well. So thank you. Thank you for sharing, Tim. Tell us about your journeys in Africa. Let's say, when was the first time you went to Africa, and what was the first country you went to, and how was your reception there?
First time I visited Africa was when I was about 4 years old. So because of that, I don't remember any of it. According to the pictures that they show me, I visited Tanzania back when I was about 4 years old. I think spent a couple of weeks there. My first kind of trip now in living memory back in 2012, and I visited Southern Africa, South Africa, and Zambia. So first I kind of had like a 1 week pit stop in Zambia where I went to like see family, in terms of like family friends. and just hung out and spent time there. I went to Livingstone, yes, and visited Victoria Falls. And then, yeah, I ended up taking up an internship and working in Cape Town, South Africa for about 2 months. So that was my first real kind of experience being thrown into Africa, I guess you could call it. I would definitely recommend it. It's a beautiful country. But with that said, it's like fake Africa. It's yeah, that's what people call it in terms of the types of amenities and facilities and development that you have there. Like where I was staying in Cape Town, I could drink the water from my tap. There are places in the States where you can't do that. Places in the
Mm.
UK, countries like it may be different in Spain and Italy now, but I know at the time there were whole countries where you couldn't drink from the tap at all. I'd say the overall experience, I came out of it becoming more conscious of race and heritage and yeah, blackness. Because yeah, I think especially in South Africa, yeah, it's still quite a things are still quite tense there when it comes to race in a way that it's not with compared to the rest of Africa, because South Africa is one of the few places where yeah, you've got like a relatively large white minority there. In terms of there's 5 million white South Africans in South Africa, like 9% of the population. So yeah, like I'd say, yeah, South Africa maybe, yeah, it left me feeling more conscious, even a bit radicalized, because South Africa is a bittersweet place. In terms of the facilities and physically speaking, it's a developed country. But when you look at the socio-economic situation and the fact that so much of the population, the 90% in terms of like Black South Africans, many colored South Africans, where they're just wealthless and wealth divide in terms of ownership of property, businesses. It's just very stark. Like, and the settler South Africans, the white South Africans, they have like an overwhelming majority of the country's wealth. So it does leave you asking a lot of questions.
You mentioned that your trip to South Africa made you more cognizant about issues related to race and also maybe radicalized you a bit. What exactly do you mean by that? Did you have a preconception before and then a revelation after, or a new understanding after?
I'll say this, what we're doing right now, or the way things are right now, are severely out of whack and just out of alignment, like a healthy equilibrium when we like think about the Black experience and just prospects when it comes to different African countries. Just, yeah, something here needs to change. When you're exposed to that kind of picture with such a stark divide, it's not acceptable. Experience that truly hit me was I was by Clifton Beach, which is, yeah, Sea Point, Cape Town, which is like where the beach area is. And, you've got the public beach. And then as you walk further up towards the mountains, this is where you start to get the houses on the hills and, overlooking the beach. And that's where the like prime real estate is. Okay, that's
Mhm.
where a lot of like money is.
Mhm.
And, the more you walk into this neighborhood, it's just the less Black it became.
Wow.
And, you started you're walking and you look around and you look at the people driving the cars. There's all these nice cars like Mercedes, BMWs. Who's driving the cars, who's walking around, who's in the houses. And I kid you not, I walked around a bit. I saw one Black person, and he was the security guard for like one of the apartment complexes. You look at that and you go, there's something unnatural. The intervention has come in and just really just shaking this up and just pulled things out of whack. This just doesn't make sense, and it's like not right. More of the same.
Would you mind listing all the countries in Africa that you visited and then tell us, how you ended up in Rwanda?
All the countries in Africa I visited. Zambia, South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda. How I found myself in Rwanda. Let's just say I'm in between locations right now. But for the 2.5 years prior to this, I was living in Kenya, Mombasa, Kenya. I worked online, just was mainly based there. And I enjoyed my time in Kenya. Mombasa has great food, great Swahili food, and also some local like African, Bantu dishes. And then nice beaches, good vibe. Kenya, that's another place. If your viewers are wondering about where to start their journey in Africa, Kenya is one of the countries I'd recommend.
Tell us about being in Kigali. How are you adjusting there? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel safe there? What's the situation like for you?
Kigali, is a very, very, very safe place. It reminds me of China, or when I was there in terms of the safety, where it's the type of place, you can just walk around and at any time of the night, whether you're a man or a woman. Very safe. I was even when I speak to locals here and they talk about certain areas and they go, "Oh no, don't go to that area. It's the ghetto. It's one of our ghettos." So I'm like, you guys don't know a ghetto. I'll show you a ghetto in terms of like, maybe in these places, I don't know, every couple months somebody might have a disagreement. Maybe they'll have like a fisticuff that lasts for like 10 or 15 seconds and then everybody jumps in and breaks it up. There's the talk of the town for the next month. But so Rwanda's very safe in terms of people just aren't really on that vibe. And then there's quite a fairly large police presence, quite a discreet manner. It's funny in that way. You'll just be kind of walking by in your own business and you turn a corner and you just see a police just standing there by the bushes, well, by like a hedge, just sort of, just keeping watch. There's a lot of police around here. Safe, orderly, good infrastructure, like amazing roads. Electricity is fairly reliable. There's work to do, but it could be a lot worse. As you can see, the Wi-Fi is quite stable. We've had this talk for how long, and there's been barely any interruptions. So I'd say Kigali is like the good first destination for people who are dipping their toes and kind of getting a feel for the continent of Africa. It can act as a good way to transition you into it because it's relatively convenient in terms of the lifestyle and the amenities. With that said, though, it's still kind of early days here. It's still a bit of a smaller country and city, so things move at a slower pace. It's not necessarily as hustle as to say a Nairobi, where, in my opinion, Nairobi's another one where it's kind of like fake Kenya, where when you go there, it's like to me, it feels like a European city, at least many parts of it. When you look at its roads and its infrastructure and just the scale of it all. But yes, Kigali, things move at a slower pace, but people are polite, friendly, safe, peaceful. Yeah. They call it the land of 1,000 hills, and no, they're not. They're being serious. Like every street and everywhere you're walking is a hill to some degree or another. So get ready to give your legs that work.
Well, there are two schools of thought when it comes to Black people from the diaspora traveling. One school says that, Black people should travel everywhere and, just try to find what's good and what's bad about a place. And there are other people that say that Black people primarily should travel to the continent, specifically Black Africa. What's your opinion about this? Do you think it's best for us to be going abroad everywhere or spending our dollars or relocating to Africa?
I'm not saying like everybody has to travel to Africa. There are other places people want to travel to for their different reasons. But I definitely think the norm at play right now, which is where Black people, particularly like Black people from different Western countries, There are those who maybe their parents are Nigerian or Ghanaian, so because of that, they like will visit that one specific country, like no others. This current situation, at least I know back in the UK, where when I've been with my black friends in the past, on so many different occasions, when it comes to talking about traveling and trips, it's just a strange thing where all of the countries now on the list, people talk about Asia, like, oh, Thailand, Indonesia, let's go to Greece, let's go to Cyprus, let's go to Ayia Napa, let's go to Turkey, let's go to, Miami, the States, Mexico, whatever. They'll say every country under the sun besides Africa. And that situation needs to change. It'd be nice for us to be in a space where, yeah, different African countries become, yeah, another tourist destination to us in the same way that Spain or Thailand and these places are. So yeah, I'm not saying that like, oh, everybody should only focus on coming to Africa, but yeah, more of us, yeah, more than what is currently the case. Because yeah, that's another thing that I'm sure you can relate to as someone who's traveled within Africa yourself, that you begin to see where, yeah, you go there and when it comes to other visitors, like there's none of us. We are not there in terms of like an actual contingency, like an actual contingent and community. It's very few and far between. We barely even have communities, and it's this situation where I'm in Kenya, and you're going to all these different hotspots and these cultural sites, and even not just those places, but also in the villages in the middle of nowhere. And if you're going to see a visitor or someone who's not Kenyan, it's not going to be us. More than likely, it's going to be a white person. That's essentially this, at least from what I've seen in terms of my tourism travels across Africa, is overwhelmingly the like foreigners that are coming to visit and see the continent and live there and do business. A lot of them are Asians and white. It's not us. Maybe it'll be at the end of this century where things surrounding the African continent change when it comes to its influence and its perception. I don't know. But yeah, we want to have a situation where, everybody who's black in America and black in the UK can either say that they visited the continent before or they plan to. That's what I think, we want the space we want to be at. Just like how back in the States, if you meet Indian Americans and Vietnamese Americans, they're going back to their countries and going back to Asia every summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They're making those bonds, those familial bonds, right?
Yeah. And doing business as well. There's also that aspect.
Yeah, exchanging capital, money flowing back and forth from those countries. Definitely, I agree with you 1,000%. We need to strengthen those bonds between the diaspora and the continent. Even if those bonds aren't there already, we need to develop them and grow them. Did you feel any sort of separation or cultural barrier interacting with Black people from the continent, like in Rwanda or like in Zambia, and, you being from the diaspora? Like, was there ever that, sort of barrier?
Yes. Yeah, I guess so. To make a long story short, I'm coming from the UK. I'm British with a bit of spice. I spent, so much of my life in the UK, becoming acculturated to all of that. Those cultural differences in terms of how we may communicate, certain ways we may express ourselves, and yeah, just those like cultural norms and differences. You can see there's like a bit of a difference and there's a bit of a distance. And this is what I find quite fun and cool about being in Africa. In a weird way, being here reminds me of being like, the times I was back in China, like in 2010, in terms of a lot of the things, a lot of the kind of phenomena that was at play in China at that time are at play in Africa right now, in terms of, and the main one being just the massive movement of people from the countryside to the cities. So it's the same thing in China where you had people who, their parents were farmers and their parents' parents were farmers and their parents. The way that many of those people in the countryside were living was very similar to how their families lived hundreds of years ago. Even now, when you go to some parts of the countryside in China or different parts of Africa, there's still no TV, there's still no reliable electricity. So, it's like a time capsule. It's like, it's stuck in time. So, yeah, you see the same thing happening with Africa now, where within these different countries, lots of people are moving from the countryside to the cities, which is why they always building. And yeah, you just get that cultural difference of somebody who's from the countryside and then somebody who's from the city. But in my case, it's like, London. So then, you kind of, that sort of exacerbates those differences at times. But, we we find ways to have our cultures and experiences complement each other, or at least that's what we strive towards.
Last question in relation to Africa. Would you suggest that Black people from the diaspora visit Kigali or visit Rwanda in general? And is there a particular city or country in Africa that you think is a good springboard for somebody to travel in Africa or be introduced to Africa?
Yeah, I would recommend that people visit Rwanda. First of all, it's quite a small country. So when it comes to traveling to other parts of the country and seeing different sites, it's quite easy. It doesn't necessarily take too long. And yeah, it's really clean here. It's like organized. It's developed in some ways. Where you can kind of just live life conveniently, and then it's also quite close to Uganda and Tanzania, so you can come here and get like an East African visa. You pay $100 for that, 90 days, multiple entry between Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania. Well, maybe I don't think Tanzania is included. Well, I know Kenya is, like those countries. So yes, I'd recommend Rwanda in that respect. In terms of Black travelers in general, I guess I'm going by my experience. And yeah, I would recommend Kenya more than anywhere else because, it's also fairly developed in different respects. It's quite big. What I tell people is the trains run on time in Kenya. It's the type of place, so long as you've got the money to pay for it, you're going to get it. When it comes to like its technology, its finance, its real estate, its tourism, it's competitive. It's not, Kenya's not a poor country, and that's why you never hear anybody say that. And officially speaking, it's actually a lower mid-income country, and they definitely have a lot going for them. And just there was a lot of things that I took for granted in Kenya. And then you go to other parts of Africa, and just even other parts of the world, and then you go, oh, okay, Kenya's doing decent over there. Yeah, so I would say, Kenya's it's just relatively easy to transition into life in Africa. Like in Kenya, almost everybody can speak English and speak English to quite a decent level. You've got a nice train system there. Flights are like easily available and easy to get. Uber's there. It's just, nice.
Kenya right now, a great recommendation for any Black travelers thinking about hitting the continent. We're heading towards the end of this, but thank you so much, Tim, for your insight on everything related to China and Africa and everything. It's valued so much. We want to continue to support you and see you grow in your content creation and in your writing and your academic and intellectual development. Briefly, tell us, what Sleeping Giant Africa is, what you want to do with it, what sort of videos you'll be releasing, what you'll be writing about. And by the way, I want to recommend everybody go watch the video he did about the red, blue, and white bag or the Turkish suitcase. Very good video on his channel.
Cheers, appreciate it very much, son. Yeah, the pleasure is mine as well. It'd be great to just, rattle off with it. It's help me reflect on a few things and take a trip back down memory lane. Um, as for Sleeping Giant and my other YouTube channels, I think for now I'm kind of sort of chilling with them a bit, and I guess I'm spending more time on writing, like on writing different articles. So I guess moving forward, um, I'm looking to just like write more articles on Africa on different topics, and I don't know, depending on the feedback and the response that it gets, I may decide whether I will take those articles and then turn them into video essays. There's always that option, but those video essays, like they take time to do, let's say. So it's like if I'm going to do it, it has to be for a big ticket type of thing.
Right.
At this point in time, right now. Yeah, but yeah, right now, Timothy Lobban Medium page, just focusing on my writing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this scholar will be continuing to write about Africa and write about whatever, I guess, engages his mind. And definitely we look forward to hearing more of your insight. Tim, thank you so much for coming on here. Is there any last words you want to share with the people?
I guess just be safe. Take care of yourself. I hope you're keeping well, and get your ass over here to Africa.
Amen. Amen.
Join us. Yeah.
All right. Hopefully him and I will be collaborating more in the future. This will not be a one and done. This man might be making more appearances on this channel, and I might make some appearances on his. But thank you so much, Tim, for being here. Thank you everybody for watching. Please be safe out there in the world, and peace.